Hi, this is Matthew again. Trying just to do a brief history of what we now as the audio book, but most of my life I just called the talking book, because I listened to mostly the blind library stuff then. Tapes were, not as common, but if you did get one, it was abridged usually, and the talking books were unabridged for the most part. Basically, of course, we know that Braille was invented by Louis Braille in the 1800s, and that got standardized throughout the years. And obviously, libraries started to print it after a while, which they did for many years. I think there were moon type and some other things that were around, but Braille was the more common, at least that I know of. I've never seen the other forms that were out before, or during, obviously. But fast forward to World War I, and a lot of veterans and obviously various countries were blinded at times during the war, and they either couldn't read Braille for whatever reason, just couldn't get it, or it was just too slow for them, or just the availability of books just because they take so long to make. There's a big, because it's multiple volumes instead of, about one book is 3+ volumes sometimes, depending on what the book, how long the book is. So, people were thinking, if only we could just have these books read to us, since, can't always get a book read to us, or no one's around, or whatever it was, whatever reason. I think it started basically over here in the U.S. with people basically contacting RCA to try to develop something. So they had the 78s, but you only put a few minutes on those. I think they got to where you could do 15, but that wasn't quite enough. They somehow got it to 30 minutes, I think just kind of by slowing it down, basically. They were able to get more space, more time per side. And that went around a while. It started here. Really didn't get set up here. It started, we established a library here in 31. The British did too, but we didn't get started until about 34 of actually getting them out to people. It seems from American Foundation for the Blind, I think, was the first one. Others, like APH, American Printing House for the Blind, they all came on later, others besides them. We got started in the UK, and other countries started putting them out, which is good. Got more titles going, different things like that. AFB got creative, American Foundation for the Blind. They even would put things to music, just because it was such a new medium, they wanted to try things out. Put books to music. They would dramatize plays. They would have a few people reading plays even. There is something, I just found various things online from either like the Library of Congress website or National Library here in Missouri, the state library there. Stuff in the RNAB. There's a thing I found where a guy who had digitized all the AFB stuff, and it was I think you can just Google American Foundation for the Blind digital collection, which apparently have digitized, and he just had some samples. There was a neat little thing they did with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I don't think they did this past this, but they got the movie audio somehow. And in the visual sections, because there's a sample on this website, that collection one, where a guy kind of like a book is narrating what's going on, but it's in like book form. I'd love to hear that. I wish that was available. I wish all that stuff had been converted and put into the collection on Bard and whatnot so we could hear it, but they didn't, just did a few here and there. I know there's a lot of books I could like to have read again, but they weren't converted. Like, I know there's the Tom Swift books from the 60s weren't done, really. I think there was a couple. And like the Killer Angels by Michael A. Shara, the version up there is the 99 version, which I didn't even know about because I'd read the book by then. I wasn't looking for it. There was an older version on cassette, so they could have converted it. It was clearly, there must have been a master of it. It was the record, like from the record, it even had the tones to say when the record had ended and began, but that's not there. But we had those records, like kind of more shellacky ones. Then they came up with big, kind of harder 33, like you would normally play on a record player, but they had a slower speed for that. Big things. It could scratch fairly easily. I don't know how many books we sent back, like for Tom Swift, that, and this was in the 90s even, they were still had them in circulation. It was defective. They'd send me another one out so you could finish the book, and because it would just start skipping so bad you couldn't finish the book out. So they just sent out another ones. I think by the late 70s, early 80s, they had flexible discs going out, which were thinner, made a really weird sound when you moved them around. But they would put magazines on them and short book bestsellers. They would didn't have to use the big records for those. They weren't probably quite as durable, of course, but they did play. Of course, like originally you could have something like Progress of Time here. I know there's a Alexander Scorby recording of Study in Scarlet, the first Sherlock Holmes book he reads, on Bard, and it says on 9 records. Well, I'm assuming like even from the 70s, that would have been down to maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3. And you might have had a little more with the flexible discs, I'm not sure, but the envelope for those was much smaller than like the bigger record containers, where it was more like a little cardboard thing that had all the records were in one little sleeve, and you just pulled out, they were all labeled, of course, but you just pulled them out of one paper kind of thing, envelope sort of deal inside of it. I guess more like a sleeve, but it came out. In the middle there, at least here, I don't know really if we had anything tape-wise before the 4-track tape in 77, which the first book is available on Bard of that. It was Roots by Alex Haley. I forget the man's name. Sounds African-American. So he reads that book. That is available on Bard from 77. So if you want to hear the first talking book, it's Roots, which I should read at some point. So that began, and we had those for the long time. You didn't have to, you only had a few tapes that you put in, maybe, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how long the book was, because you got about 90 minutes a side. So that speeds things along. And then, of course, early 2000s with digital stuff came in, and that's great. You don't have to do anything. You just let it go for hours. You don't have to flip anything or change anything or all that. So I know RNIB had a tapette system, like a compact cassette they use in their tape machines that was around forever. Tech Moan on YouTube does a video about it. He was sent one, and there's a book with it as well. He kind of explains it, but I obviously have never seen one, so I don't really know how they work terribly well. They seem kind of interesting. I know there was a bell that would ding at certain times with certain parts of the tape that you would have to move to get to the book. I think it was all with one big solid thing. You have to change the track on occasionally to get it to play the next thing. Otherwise, if you kept playing, you would go back and play the thing you just read. So, which we didn't have that problem because we had a little side selector. Because you put in side 1, side 2, flip it, put side 1 back in, so it became 3. Flip again, it was 4. Obviously, if you put a regular tape in our players, it would just go backwards because it wasn't designed for that. That was fun discovering that in 7th grade. Late to the party. But yeah, that's just kind of the evolution there that's happened over the years. Of course, audiobooks are more common commercially with Audible and other things. When I was a kid, Audible wasn't around, so you either got something like that from the Library for the Blind, or you went to the library and got an abridged book, which wasn't as fun because you were missing tons of books and you knew that, but you couldn't do anything about it, especially if it did not get read out. Of course, to my horror, I've discovered after the fact now that they were done after I read them, or someone would have had to have read it to me or something. But I'm glad they're out now, but they weren't when I was needing them as a kid. But yeah, that's kind of just my head knowledge about kind of how that started a little bit. Book-wise, talking books and things. There's a YouTube video where there's a guy, I forget his name, but he repairs the old machines. He's got a whole bunch. I don't know where they've come from, but he repairs just any number of like the old record players from 60s, 70s, 40s, I think a 30s one maybe, tape machines. He does show the cartridge players. they have now, which you just stick a cartridge in and it plays them, or you can put in a flash drive and play off that. There's a new one coming supposedly this year that has Wi-Fi, so you can just connect to Bard directly and get a book. I'm not sure how you search for books and whatnot, but you can apparently get it Wi-Fi, cartridge, and thumb drive. So you'd have about 3 ways to get a book onto one of those. I like to use them. I've got a few things that are cartridge-only libraries that I'm in, and then I've got a whole bunch of stuff on thumb drives, like radio programs and things I can just put in there and listen. It's got a pretty good sound on it, so I tend to use it for that. I need to go back to some of those dramas, but I'm reading like a book on there that is only on cartridge from a place. But yeah, I kind of it'd be nice to have all 3 on there. I could kind of have bits of all 3 going at different times, but that's kind of my best I can explain talking book history. There's some info out there, not tons of info, but some that can explain it better than I did. Getting to all the speed differences of records and how they were made, and every country's story is different, I think, from libraries and how long they have had them and what they had to use and stuff. But whatever country you're in, besides anywhere, just you can look online, just put in something about talking books with your country's name in the search, and you should hopefully find something out there. I wish there were more videos about that, but there aren't. Actually, some stuff is harder to find now since it's older stuff, and it's probably been recycled or destroyed or thrown away or whatever. But there are things out there, I guess, through eBay and other things. Some of them still exist. I feel it's a history that it needs to be known about. Be people, we know where we've come from and what we used, and I just find it interesting. Plus, I used a lot of it growing up, so I just it interests me. History interests me anyway, so I think I will try not to ramble any further about it, but I just thought someone might find this interesting. At least I did, and I've just kind of been researching off and on for a while now at different times about stuff, so looking things up and trying to figure it out, like how it all happened. In fact, there's where was that? It was on a Facebook, the Blind Things and Stuff group. Somebody had posted somewhere of the record from like the 20th anniversary of Talking Books from the 50s. That was neat. And he also had the instruction record that came with the record players about how they worked, because it was very different than what I used. And they even had examples of like what a bad needle sounded like and stuff like that. It was really, really, really neat stuff that they did not do in the 80s and 90s or whatever that was the one I got. Being an 80s and 90s kid, but I don't know for sure when that instruction record had been made. So I don't know, one of the Talking Book tape ones where the instructions had, one was like English and Spanish instructions, and then there was another one that had like samples of books. It was probably from the 70s or something, because they had Terry Hayes Sales reading Dune, which is not available. A very, very young Terry Hayes Sales, and they're reading that, part of the different other books. But I only saw that tape once. I think they probably are still at the house somewhere. I hope both of those instruction tape. I still can play. I still kept my machine and my record player too. Yeah, I know they're just going to be destroyed if I send them back. I would hate that. But I will not ramble any further and get this completed. I will see you guys in another video.